Hello guys, welcome to my channel. So in this video I am going to explain the different ways of creating a thread. So initially before that you just remember the one thing, thread will not do anything until we tell what to perform. That means we need to assign the task to the thread, then only it will perform the task. So how do we assign the task or the work? So we will write inside the run method. So what is a thread? A thread is the smallest unit of an execution, right? So thread we call it as a worker, and a thread as run method. So in the run method we are defining the task, or you can say you are assigning the task to the worker. So now we will see the different ways of creating a thread. First we will see the thread creation by using a thread class. So you can see it here. So what I am doing is I am creating a class, my class extend thread. Okay, so there is a run method, so I am overriding that run method and I am simply writing a print statement. The thread is running. So in the main method, so I am creating a object of that thread class, that is my thread is equal to new my thread. So whenever I create a object of my thread class, the thread object will be created, but no the thread object has not been created. So but whenever like the new thread has not been created, but whenever you call this thread dot start method, then what happens is the JVM will tell the operating system to create a new thread. So once it creates a new thread, then JVM will tells to call this run method on this new thread. Okay, and also you will never call this run method directly to start a new thread. So in upcoming sessions I'll explain why we cannot call the run method directly. So you can see I got the output as thread is running. So what happens is when I call the thread dot start method, a new thread has been created and that thread is responsible for the execution of run method. So now you can see we have a question like, does start execute the run method? Yes. So because in this example you can see that whenever I call the start dot thread dot start method, so the JVM will create a new thread and then it invokes this run method on the new thread. That's why we are getting thread is running as an output. Okay. So next we will go to the method 2. So how do we create a thread by using a runnable interface? So like this is the most preferred one. What happens is with the previous approach, uh, uh, my thread is extending a thread class. In the same way, if I want to extend some another class, then you will get the error. Why? Java does not support multiple inheritance. That's why you will get the error. You can see it here. Yeah. Imagine there is a class employee and it extends a person class. So can it extend a thread because class employee extends already person and I am trying to extend a thread class? No, it's not possible because Java does not support multiple inheritance through classes. So that is why we will be using runnable. So let's see the runnable. Yeah, this is a runnable class. So what happens here is there is a class myTask and I am calling implement runnable method. So runnable is an interface. So and I will be overriding this run method. So overriding the run method, I am simply putting one print statement over here. And how do we call this method? So using a thread like thread 3 equal to new thread, and I am a new task. I am creating the object of that new task and I am adding it over here. So whenever I call t dot start method, then the new thread will be created and that is responsible for the execution of run method. Okay, but this runnable is there, right? So this is the runnable will not responsible for the creation of new thread. It will just define the task. So what is the task here? Just print the statement task is running, but the thread class, this is responsible for the execution of the task, and t dot start method is responsible for creating that new thread and execution of the task. Okay, so when I run this method, you can see it will print task is running. Okay, task is running. And if you want to check whether a new thread has been created, you just type thread dot current thread dot get new. So whenever you print this, you can see a new thread has been created. If the new thread is not been created, then you will be getting main thread here, but you are getting thread 0. Okay, because we are calling start method and it is responsible for creating this new thread, and new thread will run this run method. So I think we are done with method 2. Now let's jump to method 3, that is runnable with lambda. So runnable with lambda is like the most common way we are using in our program real world. So here what we are doing is we are calling thread 3 is equal to new thread, and this is the lambda expression, like the run method. So lambda expression, how we will write a run method will not while writing this method, you want to consider the name of the method, return type, everything you will not consider. So I'll just put this parenthesis and a lambda expression symbol, and I'll define the task over here. So in this running, okay, and I'm calling t dot start method. So when I call t dot start method, a new thread will be created and it is responsible for the execution of this code inside this parenthesis, that is the run method. That is one thing. Or you can say runnable is equal to new runnable. So people will think I am creating a object. No, I am not creating the object. I am creating the object for the implementation class. Okay, so because runnable is an interface, how you are creating object. So I am not creating the object, I am creating the object for the implementation class, and I am overriding the run method over here. And if I want to call this, so I used to give thread t1 is equal to new thread, and I pass this runnable, and I am calling the start method to create a new thread. So when I run this method, I will be getting running and hey, because running is from this thread, and this is from another thread. Okay, so this is how I will create a thread using the lambda. So next we will see the callable approach. Okay, so why we will need the callable approach? So as you can see, suppose there is one thread which calculates 100 plus 200, that is 300, and you want to get that answer back. Does runnable return a value? No. Why? Because you can see in this one, runnable has a run method, and what is the return type of run method? Void. That means runnable will not return a value. But if you want to return a value, then you need to go for something known as callable. Okay, that is where callable comes in, and callable can be used along with executor framework. So we will learn about executor framework later. So I'll write on simple function like callable of integer task is equal to, I'll write a lambda expression and I'll return the 300. So this is how we will use callable. So now we learned about runnable and callable. So let's see the difference between runnable and callable. Okay. So runnable, as we all know that runnable has run method. In the same way, callable has call method. And runnable does not return a value because the return type is void. But callable will return a value. And one more thing is runnable will throw the checked exception, whereas runnable will not throw the checked exception. Sorry for that. Runnable cannot throw the checked exceptions, whereas callable can throw the checked exceptions. And this runnable interface can be used along with thread and executor service. Okay, because runnable, you know, like we are using along with thread and everything, but this callable we cannot use with thread, we can use it with executor service. And runnable is simpler, whereas callable is more powerful. So these are the difference between runnable and callable. So after learning the differences, so we will go to the next question. what is the difference between start method and run method? So I'll explain it clearly. We will go to this. See, what happens is I am creating a thread. Let me remove all the comments so that you won't get confused. See, what I am doing is, so I am creating an object of my thread is equal to new my thread, and I am calling the start method. Okay, so when I call the start method, what happens is JVM will tell the operating system to create a new thread, and that new thread is responsible to call this run method. So how I can prove that is, so I whenever this run method is getting executed, I'll print the name of the thread. Okay, so by using thread dot current thread dot get name. So whenever I print the name of the thread, I'll get to know which thread is executing the run method. Let's see. You can see, I can see thread 0. Okay, thread 0 means a new thread has been created and which is responsible for the execution of run method. That means whenever I call the start method, a new thread has been created and that is responsible for execution of run method. So now what I will do, instead of start, I will just type run method. Okay, so whenever I call this run method, this run method will be executed like a normal method call. That means a new thread won't be created. New thread won't be created. Just like a normal method call, this run method will be executed. How can I show this is, since this who is responsible for the execution of this main method, main thread, right? That main thread, you can see when I run this application, that main thread is only responsible for the execution of run method itself. You can see the output you get as main. That means a main thread is only executing this run method and no new thread has been created. So I think you got the difference between start and run method. A new thread will be created in case of start method, but in run method, if you call it directly, a new thread won't be created. And now you have learnt all the approaches that are there for creating a thread, right? So you need to know which are the approaches used in a real-time project. So first one, the extending a thread class, like it's not used in the real-time projects because we will miss the inheritance benefit and you cannot extend to any other class. And implements a runnable interface, yes, it is used because in the runnable interface, we are defining a task and we are separating the task from the thread. Okay, and it works well with thread pulls, because runnable will not create object, will define the task in the run method, and the thread is responsible to create the thread and call this run method. Okay, then we have lambda with runnable, so that is also very common after Java 8. So this is what people are using. And then is callable. So callable is also more used in execute, like this runnable and callable, they are used along with executor service in the modern applications. So and if you want to like return the results, then and throw checked exceptions, definitely you should go for callable. Okay, so yeah, there is something like in the modern Spring Boot applications, you will rarely create a thread manually using a new thread, like thread t is equal to new thread. You won't use that. Instead, what you will use is, so you will submit this runnable and callable task to an executor service. Okay, so that is what we will discuss in future videos. Or you will use @async annotation. Okay, that is also one of the thing. So why we are giving the runnable and callable task to the executor services? Creating a thread is expensive, and also this maintaining this thread pools is also very difficult. So that's why we will give this task to the executor service. So it will handle the thread pools and also the manage the threads efficiently. Because of which we are using executor service. Okay. So then we will look some of the common mistakes people are doing. So first one is a thread dot run. Okay, you should like as a beginner you will call thread dot run method. So what is the problem is, if you call thread dot run method, so the run method will be called just like a normal method call, and no new thread has been created. And another thing is calling the thread dot start method twice. Okay, if you call the thread.start method twice, then you will get the illegal like thread state exception. Why? Because a thread instance can be started only once. Okay, if you are trying to call twice, you will get that exception that I mentioned. Then thread, and manually you will not create a thread using the thread class, like thread t is equal to new thread. So that option is like is not there, that is ruled out. And let's discuss some of the common interview questions. So how many ways are there to create a thread in Java? So there are some couple of ways, that is by extending a thread class, which we will not use, and by implementing a runnable interface, and by implementing a callable interface if you want to return a value, and this is executed through executor service. So that is one thing. And which one is preferred? So in the industry, so runnable is often runnable with lambda, I told you, right? Runnable with lambda, and also this callable, so both are preferred. So we will submit this runnable and callable task to the executor service, and it will be executed through the executor service. And can we call start twice? So as I discussed, if you cannot call a thread instance twice, if we are calling, you will get illegal thread state exception. Why is runnable preferred over extending thread? As you all know that, because runnable will separate the task from the thread, and also if you are implementing runnable, so you have the flexibility to extend an class, and you are not missing that inheritance benefit, because Java does not support multiple inheritance. So that is the answer for this. And I think we have discussed more about how many ways of creating a thread and some of the interview questions, and I also showed you some of the examples related to the programs that we discussed. So if you have any questions, please write it down in the comment section, and thank you so much for watching.